They called it a cursed deadly bend where a woman with a blood-black face dragged souls to their death. The truth was a man counting money in the dark. Welcome to Alex Storytime, and I am Alex. One winter afternoon in 2011, the outdoor temperature was lower than 20 Celsius degrees below zero. A jeep equipped with snow tires was driving along a mountain road. Looking out of the window, the scenery along the way was very characteristic of the region. On all sides were boundless, primeval forests, deep as ink. The winding road was covered in thick snow, like a white ribbons coiling around the hillside. If at that moment you rolled down the window, what would hit your face would be a biting yet incomparably pure air. The vehicle would soon reach a great river. There were some islands on the river, and upon climbing onto one of them, you could see a watchtower on the opposite bank. On that tower stood some Russian soldiers, looking towards this side of the river through their binoculars. Yes, this vehicle was heading to Gucheng Island, Old City Island, on the China-Russia border. This small island is located in the Heilongjiang River, 4 kilometers north of Xin'an town, Mohe City, in the Greater Qing'an Range region of Heilongjiang Province. It is 50 meters from the Chinese side and 350 meters from the Russian side, facing the Russian town of Albazin across the river. Why would this vehicle go into Gucheng Island? That starts with the people sitting in it. There were 3 people in the jeep in total: He Wei, Feng Rui, and the driver. He Wei was an officer at a local police station in the Great Qing'an Range. Right after graduating from a police academy, he was assigned to this police station. And this year was already his 7th year. During these 7 years, He Wei had performed exceptionally well at work. He was humble and enthusiastic, and had solved many cases. These stories reached the ear of Feng Rui, a publicity officer, similar to an internal journalist for the police at Harbin Police Bureau. So that winter, Feng Rui specifically traveled from Harbin to the depth of the Great Qing'an Range to interview He Wei about his deeds. The interview lasted nearly a week and went very smoothly. Just as Feng Rui had finished writing his materials and was preparing to return to Harbin, He Wei proposed taking him to Xin'an town to see the scenery there. Feng Rui often wrote news reports for many police officers, and in the past he had received quite a few similar invitations. Although he was grateful in his heart, under normal circumstances, considering his busy work schedule, he would decline politely. But this time was a little different. He Wei's exact words at the time were, "Brother Feng, do you dare to go to Xin'an town?" Why did He Wei ask this? Because Xin'an town was not only beautiful, it also had many scary legends. Where did these legends originate? From the Gucheng Island we mentioned earlier. The island's English name can be literally translated as Old City Island. It was once the ancient battlefield of the Battle of Yaksa. Friends who are particularly interested in history should be familiar with the Battle of Yaksa. This was a series of 2 border battles fought in the late 17th century between the Qing dynasty of China and Russia for control of the Heilongjiang River basin. Why is it called the Battle of Yaksa? Yaksa is actually a place name. Gucheng Island and the Russian town of Albazin face each other across the river. In fact, Albazin is Yaksa, the same place. It's just that the Russian side calls it Albazin while the Chinese side calls it Yaksa. Once you understand that Gucheng Island was once a battlefield, you can probably guess why there are so many terrifying stories. Too many people died on the island. It is said that to this day, people see various remains of bones on the island occasionally. It is precisely for this reason that locals feel the island has very heavy yin energy. Many terrifying stories related to the Xin'an and Gucheng Island circulate among the people, each one sounding real. Therefore, locals don't like to go to the island. But for those with a strong sense of curiosity, it is full of temptation, definitely an excellent treasure trove for exploration. So after He Wei extended the invitation, Feng Rui agreed to go to Gucheng Island in Xin'an Town. After lunch the next day, the driver started the jeep, carrying He Wei and Feng Rui, and climbed the mountain road towards Xin'an Town. The group chatted along the way. He Wei said, "Brother Feng, actually don't listen to what others say. There's nothing terrifying about Xin'an Town. The most terrifying thing here is actually Duanhun Bend, literally soul-severing bend or deadly bend, right on our way to Xin'an Town." Then He Wei recounted the terrifying stories of Deadly Bend in detail. It happened not long ago. One night, Li Ming, an officer at the local industrial and commercial bureau, was driving a black Mercedes, carrying his wife and two friends, returning from Xin'an Town along this mountain road. In winter, driving on such mountain roads after snowfall is actually a real test of a driver's skill. If it's an experienced driver, they can drive at 90 kilometers per hour. If it is an inexperienced driver, the speed can only be maintained at around 50 kilometers per hour. Li Ming often drove on this road. He drove the Mercedes very fast that night. The forest was deep and dark, with thin mist lingering between the roads. The vehicle's headlights illuminated the way forward. After driving on a mountain road for some time, a friend in the backseat reminded him, "Li Ming, that bend is coming up soon. Don't forget to slow down." As soon as Li Ming heard this, he knew which bend his friend was talking about. It was an elbow-shaped bend on the mountainside. A sign stood at the bend reading, "Accident-prone area. Slow down." Strangely, this warning sign was very conspicuous. But the number of traffic accidents here in the past 2 years had been particularly high. Those vehicles that had accidents seemed not to see this warning sign at all, charging straight towards the cliff. As a result, any vehicles that had an accident at this bend had no survivors. It was from this that the bend got the name Deadly Bend. Moreover, most of the drivers who had accidents here were locals who all knew there was a sharp turn here. In winter, the road surface had snow and it was slippery, so it was natural for such roads to have accidents, but there were simply too many accidents here. And even more bizarre was that whenever there was an accident, no survivors. There were many such accidents, but Li Ming did not believe in them much. For him, as long as he reduced his speed to 30 kilometers per hour at such a bend, there would absolutely be no problem. So when his friend reminded him, he replied carelessly, "I know, I'll drive slowly." Then the bend was about to arrive. Li Ming estimated that the warning sign would soon come into view. Unfortunately, at that moment, an unexpected scene appeared before his eyes in a sudden. Following the direction of the headlights, he saw a woman with waist-length hair and a tall, slender figure walking alone along the roadside with her back to them on a mountain road in the deep winter, at lower than 20 degrees below zero. Who would be out for a walk? They were all locals. They had heard the terrifying stories of Xin'an town and normally did not pay much attention to them. But at this moment, they all remembered them. All kinds of terrifying stories flooded into their minds at once. The four people held their breath and stared at the woman's back. Among them, Liming, who was driving, was especially careful. He reduced his already slowing car to the lowest speed. When you are walking at night and a car comes up behind you, what is the normal reaction? You would definitely turn around to look. Even if you did not hear the sound of the engine, you would see the light from the headlights and then move to the side to ensure your safety. But this woman never turned around to look. She walked step by step slowly. Li Ming's car followed behind the woman, moving forward at a very low speed. In an enclosed cabin, no one spoke. There was only the humming sound of the engine. In silent and tense atmosphere, the car gradually approached the woman. Just as they were about to overtake her, the woman turned around in a sudden. Oh my God! In an instant, all four people were so frightened that their scalps went numb and they screamed. That woman had a dark, bluish-black face, as if her entire face was covered in dried blood. She stuck out a long tongue that hung all the way down to her chest. Li Ming subconsciously stepped on the accelerator, preparing to flee quickly. However, the second before the speed picked up, he realized something. There was the bend ahead, and beyond the bend was the cliff. So he braked hard and turned the steering wheel fast. But his reaction was still a little too slow. The car's left front wheel had already crossed over the cliff. He could feel the car slipping out of his control. He jerked the steering wheel, and the car returned to the mountain road successfully. Then he floored the accelerator, and the Mercedes flew down the mountain, all the way until they got home. None of the four people dared to look back. Their faces were all pale. After Li Ming parked the car and locked the garage, they got out of the car and looked at each other, gasping for breath. After a very, very long time, finally someone spoke. Did you all see that? The other three nodded frantically. Is this real? We all saw it. How could it not be real? Li Ming's wife let out a scream, and his two friends did not dare to go home and stayed at Li Ming's house. Soon, this incident spread throughout the area. Everyone knew about it, including He Wei. He Wei was now telling it to Feng Rui. He Wei asked, "Do you think this story is real?" Feng Rui said, "I don't believe it." He Wei said, "Right. I also think someone did this deliberately." Feng Rui asked, "If someone is dressing up as a ghost, there should be footprints on the ground, right?" He Wei said, "The traffic police did not find any strange footprints when they handled the accident." As they were chatting, the jeep passed a sharp bend. He Wei told Feng Rui, "This bend is the so-called deadly bend." Feng Rui looked in the direction He Wei was pointing. Not far away was the Heilongjiang River, and across the river was the Russian town of Albazin. Feng Rui said, "This is deadly bend. There's nothing special about it." He Wei said, "Although the legends say the female ghost only appears at night, even at night, encountering her is absolutely a very low probability event. I've passed this bend many times at night and had never seen any strange figure." The driver said, "Hey, a female ghost isn't someone just anyone can see. Whoever sees one is lucky. I guess a little broken down jeep isn't even good enough for a ghost to look at. The driver's words made both He Wei and Feng Rui laugh. The atmosphere in the jeep was very relaxed and cheerful, completely unaffected by the terrifying stories. Before long, they arrived at Xin'an town. They drove across the frozen surface of the Heilongjiang River and reached their final destination, Gucheng Island. Unfortunately, just as they landed on the island, it snowed heavily. Feng Rui could faintly see a tattered sign ahead that read, Yaksa Ancient Battlefield. The group got out of the jeep and amid the wind and snow, visited this ancient site. Because the entire Gucheng Island was covered in snow, Feng Rui didn't see the rumored remains of warriors. He could only see some large Muklang buildings. So, what are Muklang buildings? It is a term transliterated from Russian. Muklang buildings are a type of traditional residential log cabin common in northeast China and Russia. These Muklang buildings on Gucheng Island were built by lumberjacks in the late Qing dynasty. They are now over 100 years old. Although they look dilapidated, the houses were built with very tall and thick pine logs. So after all these years, they haven't rotted at all and are still very sturdy. Actually, there is no problem with people living in them, but unfortunately, all these houses are now abandoned, with no one living inside. There was once a rumor that at night on Gucheng Island, you could hear the neighing of war horses and earth-shattering battle cries. And sometimes the Muklang buildings on the island would emit light at night. Keep in mind that Gucheng Island has no electricity, and that was definitely not electric light. This island has all kinds of eerie legends. In winter, basically no one comes to Gucheng Island. Only in summer do villagers from Xin'an town go to the island to farm. But as soon as it gets dark, they will definitely leave the island. No one spends the night here. Feng Rui, He Wei, and the driver walked around the desolate island. Saying that it was getting dark, they decided to head back. Their jeep passed through the ice and snow and returned to Xin'an town. The group ate dinner at a small restaurant in town, then returned along the same mountain road. Of course, they passed the Deadly Bend again, but they didn't see any female ghost or anything like that. Early the next morning, Feng Rui packed his luggage, preparing to return to Harbin, the capital of Heilongjiang province. He Wei came to see him off. He Wei still seemed preoccupied with the matter of Deadly Bend. So he told Feng Rui that he felt everything that happened at Deadly Bend was not accidents, but possibly murders. He meant that these car accidents were not accidents, but were deliberately caused by someone. Of course, it was just a guess. He hadn't figured out exactly how the crime was committed. First, there were so many accidents. Second, there were these ghost rumors. So he had a feeling that something was off about this matter. As for Feng Rui, he encouraged He Wei to dig deeper. And when the case was solved, he would come to interview He Wei again. Actually, Feng Rui didn't really expect this agreement to be fulfilled. After all, this series of events sounded too bizarre. He felt the possibility of solving the case was very low, and it seemed very difficult to investigate. It was a very remote place with no surveillance. There were only a few so-called eyewitnesses. So did He Wei solve the case? If he did, how did he solve it? In a blink of an eye, a year passed. It was now the winter of 2012. By this time, Feng Rui had long forgotten about Deadly Bend. But just then, he received a phone call. The call was from He Wei. He told Feng Rui that he had solved the Deadly Bend case. The entire process of solving the case was torturous, but brilliant. First, He Wei's first idea was to stake out a deadly bend. He often went there, wanting to see this female ghost. But as soon as his superior learned of this idea, it was immediately vetoed. The superior felt this was an impractical method. There were many accidents at the Deadly Bend, but this was traffic police work, not their police station's work. Additionally, the forest had all kinds of animals and even beasts. So, investigating these car accident cases at Deadly Bend, setting up a tent was impossible. And parking a car there for a long time was also impossible. If someone was orchestrating these accidents, the police actions would be exposed. Moreover, He Wei would also be unsafe if he worked alone. He had to think of another way. Usually, when catching criminals, the police look for eyewitnesses. Now that they were catching a ghost, the method was the same. Who had seen that ghost? Li Ming, his wife, and their friends. So He Wei found Li Ming and asked him in detail about the circumstances of that night when he saw the ghost. He also shared his guess that he believed someone was dressing up as a ghost to commit premeditated murder. But after hearing his words, Li Ming shook his head and said, No. It's not murder. It's a ghost. I didn't believe in these things before either. After that experience, I believe everything. If you had experienced it yourself, you would know. As he spoke, a large string of prayer beads on Li Ming's wrist caught He Wei's attention. He asked, So you started believing in Buddhism after that, right? Li Ming said, Indeed. After that instant, I started believing in Buddhism, and very devoutly. His wife and two friends were the same. They were now very devout Buddhists. Overall, Li Ming insisted that he had seen a ghost that night. And it seemed like he wasn't lying. He Wei saw that these questions were useless, so he asked Li Ming, It was so late that night. Where were you four coming back from? Li Ming was visibly stunned by this question. Then he said he had gone to Xin'an Town to visit a friend that night. Who in Xin'an Town? It's my jurisdiction. I know every household. What's your friend's name? He Wei continued to ask. Li Ming was very nervous and said, I won't tell you. This had nothing to do with the case. From then on, no matter how He Wei tried to persuade him, Li Ming refused to say who he had visited in Xin'an Town that night. They had gone as a group of four that night. Why couldn't he tell He Wei? Li Ming was a governor with no criminal record. He was just an eyewitness to a female ghost. But he refused to say who he had visited. He Wei questioned the other three people, but in the end, he still couldn't get an answer. And so, amid all kinds of doubts, a few more months passed. In May of 2012, another accident occurred at the Deadly Bend. The driver died. There were no survivors. Upon hearing the news, He Wei arrived at the scene before the traffic police. Although it was already May, the Greater Canyon Range was still snowing, and the road at Deadly Bend was covered in a thick layer of snow. The car that had the accident had fallen into the cliff in front of Deadly Bend. The cliff wasn't deep, only about 10 meters, but it was enough to cause the driver to die. Looking at the scene, He Wei remembered something Feng Rui had once said. If someone is deliberately causing accidents, there should be footprints on the ground. But there were no footprints on the road surface. He Wei started searching from the road towards the accident site. Unexpectedly, he found a clear footprint at the foot of the mountain. The footprint was large and looked like a man's footprint. Next, He Wei returned to the accident site. That is the cliff in front of Deadly Bend. He descended the slope of the cliff and then found more footprints in the weeds. These footprints were hidden in very dense weeds and were hard to discover without a careful inspection. And they disappeared not far from the vehicle wreckage. Looking at these footprints, He Wei reasoned out a possibility. This was a man dressed up as a female ghost to scare people. Why were there no footprints on the road? Because the wind and snow on the mountain were very heavy. Snow was constantly falling and the wind was blowing. The road has no shelter, so even if someone walked on the snow and left a footprint, they would be covered by snow blown by the mountain wind quickly. But under the cliff was different. The mountain blocked the wind, so the footprint wouldn't disappear in a short time. Based on this intermittent footprint, He Wei simulated the movement trajectory of the footprint owner in his mind. This person should have first come up from the foot of the mountain below the Deadly Bend. He lingered near the traffic accident warning sign. After the accident occurred, this person then came from the mountainside to the bottom of the cliff. For some purpose, he approached the accident vehicle and then left directly from the bottom of the cliff. After figuring out this trajectory roughly, He Wei made some more detailed inspections. In the wilderness near the warning sign, he found several footprints that were particularly deep and dense, as if formed by repeatedly walking or stepping over the same spot. What would cause such a footprint? Right, it was very cold in winter. This person was constantly moving, so he kept stamping his feet to warm them. And right at this spot, He Wei also found several cigarette butts. They were all Russian cigarettes. Among them, a few had longer butts. It could be seen that they were Captain cigarettes, a high-end brand that Putin also smokes. Smoking high-end cigarettes meant this person had money. Would a wealthy person need to dress up as a ghost to cause traffic accidents? This was really strange. He contacted his colleagues immediately and asked the crime scene trace examination colleagues to collect the footprints and cigarette butts and bring them back to the police station for further analysis. Regarding the footprints, this was indeed a male footprint. And this person's shoes were very special. They were a very popular type of boot in Russia. He Wei conducted an investigation. Very few people had such shoes. He locked onto a suspect quickly, and when he compared the DNA left on the cigarette butts with the suspect, it was a perfect match. This person was Li Chenghai. Li Chenghai, male, 42 years old, of a Chinese-Russian mixed blood. His maternal grandma was Russian. Between 1991 and 2000, with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, gambling was legalized and flourished in Russia rapidly. In the early 2000s, Russian casinos and gambling halls could be said to be everywhere, especially in Moscow's famous pedestrian street, Arbat Street. It almost became a gathering place for casinos and nightclubs. At night, this was the liveliest place in all of Moscow. He was working in a casino in Moscow at that time. But on the night of July 1st, 2009, overnight, all the casinos on Albertus Street closed. All the casinos in Moscow, all the casinos in Russia closed, because from that day on, the Russian government's gambling ban took effect officially. However, Russia designated 4 border regions where gambling was legal. One of these regions was called Primorsky, located just across the river from Xin'an town. The night Li Ming saw the female ghost, he had actually gone to Russia to gamble. Let's continue with Li Chenghai. He had been working in Russian casinos and also loved gambling himself. His hometown was Xin'an town, so he came to work in Primorsky. A Russian friend named Igor came with him. Soon, domestic travel companies organized tourists to gamble at this place. Li Chenghai acted as a middleman between the travel companies and the casinos. And as a local, he also organized people to go to Russia to gamble directly. He knew how to enter Russia. So he and a friend named Igor, whom he had met while working at the Moscow casino, came to work at a casino on the China-Russia border. The work Li Chenghai did was definitely illegal, but it didn't seem to have any connection to murder cases. He worked at a casino. What did that have to do with the accidents at Duanhun Bend? Was he causing these accidents to get something from the crashed vehicles? Li Chenghai himself also gambled, and the money he earned was quickly lost. So he wore expensive shoes and smoked expensive cigarettes. This showed that his quality of life was very high. Where did the money come from? When he was working in Moscow, Li would rob people at night, specifically targeting Chinese people. Later, when he came to work at the casino on the China-Russia border, he still wanted to make a quick money. So he and his Russian friend Igor devised a robbery plan quickly. Igor would look for clients at the casino. If he found a Chinese person who had won a lot of money at the casino and was driving back to China, he would send a message to Li Chenghai. Duanhun Bend was a place these people had to pass on their way back to China, and the time could be calculated. As soon as he received the message from Igor, Li would calculate the time to rob these people. How did he rob them? By dressing up as a female ghost. People with good luck, like Li Ming, controlled their speed and didn't fall off the cliff. But most drivers were so frightened by Li Chenghai that they panicked and accelerated, causing an accident. After the car fell off the cliff, Li Chenghai would take the gambling winnings from the people in the car. The police asked Li Chenghai, "Why didn't you just rob them directly on the road?" Li Chenghai said, "If there were many people in the car, I couldn't rob them alone, and it would be easy for the police to discover. By dressing up as a female ghost, although it doesn't succeed every time, it's not easy for the police to discover. Don't forget, his robbery targets were very precise. So every time he could get a lot of money, and Li Chenghai also thought it was quite fun." In short, Li Chenghai robbed quite a lot of money. Through this method, he and Igor split it evenly. The two of them cooperated like this from the end of 2009 until May 2012, when He Wei arrested him. Later, the police seized wigs, women's clothing, and other tools of the crime from Li Chenghai's home. Combining past accident records with Li Chenghai's confession, Li Chenghai had engaged in such disguised robbery activities 25 times in total. Among them, 15 were unsuccessful for various reasons. That is to say, Li Qinghai had caused 10 accidents, resulting in a total of 12 deaths. After Li Qinghai was arrested, Igor was also arrested. A visitor to the case was concluded that He Wei called Feng Rui, and this investigation process was finally written into an article. I now truly feel that He Wei is an excellent police officer. It's not particularly bizarre for accidents to happen at a bend, but he was actually able to detect that something was abnormal. The probability of accidents happening at this place was too high, and whenever there was an accident, there were no survivors at all. The traffic police treated these accidents as simple accidents, and no one examined the scene or investigated the cause of death of the victims in the accident. Regarding Li Ming, the governor from the Industrial and Commercial Bureau, all that night, he had taken his wife and 2 friends to gamble in Russia under Li Qinghai's guidance. But because it was illegal border crossing and gambling, Li Ming did not dare to tell He Wei the truth. Regarding casinos, no matter what casinos in the world, the probability of winning a lot of money is very low. As He Wei said, the probability of encountering a female ghost at a bend is also very low. So finally, we have to mention what the driver said at the time. The driver's words were the most brilliant. When he was driving past the Deadly Bend, he joked with He Wei and Feng Rui. Hey, a female ghost isn't someone just anyone can see. Whoever sees one is lucky. I guess our little broken down car isn't even good enough for a ghost to look at. These words really hit the nail on the head. Because truly, only people who were lucky enough to win big money could see a ghost. And the ghost really didn't look at broken down cars. According to the police investigation, none of the vehicles involved in accidents here were trucks. They were all private cars, and relatively expensive private cars. Don't forget that when Li Ming encountered the female ghost, he was driving a Mercedes. This is the end of the whole story. Please share what you think of the story and your stories. If you enjoy my work and would like to help me continue to bring these stories to you, please subscribe to my channel or like my page. Give a thumbs up to stories you appreciate, and share your thoughts, opinions, and comments. I'd love to read them. Share stories with anyone who might find them enjoyable. And I need a co-editor, a native English speaker to make these stories better. Thank you, everybody. This is Alex's Story Time, and I am Alex. I got a lot of good stories to share with you. So, see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.